that some of us are in and who's co-organizing this event. And in his long life of activism, he has done a number of things. He's been a researcher, he's been an anti-war campaigner, he actually held the Philippines embassy in siege. And why he was not put in jail, we don't know, but he can tell us. It's in his memoirs, as he explained. He has raided the International Monetary Fund. He has won a number of awards, including the Right Livelihood Award. He has been a congressman in the Philippines. But in all these avatars, one thing that Professor Bello has been constant in, he's a street fighter. He's a street fighter for justice, for emancipation from all kinds of oppressions, and also for peace. And a street fighter metaphorically, but also actually in practice. We have often seen him holding signs and marching on the street. And that's why he's very apt that his memoirs is called Global Battlefields. But to introduce Professor Bello more deeply and shall I say with more details, I would like to invite one of his oldest friends, Ajahn Naruemon. Ajahn Naruemon is an associate professor in politics in the Faculty of Political Science. And also she's the head of the Center of Excellence on Migration and Development in Chulalongkorn University. And she's one of Walden's oldest friends. And he always says she's one of the reasons he started doing research in Thailand. And most important, she introduced Walden to his wife. So without further ado, I invite Ajahn Naruemon to please introduce Walden. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Shalmali. Yes, I focus is 30-year anniversary. I know Walden 34 years, so longer than focus, basically. And yes, that's correct. We introduced Walden to his wife because since we are, in Thai politics, so let's say this way, I and his wife, we used to work together at the Bambi Soap. So we faced the situation in 1991 coup. I was sent to San Francisco, and on one day, I take the bus to the organization called Foods First. And that was the first time that I met Professor Walden Bello. And he probably remember me that because at the end I had to borrow the money from him to pay for the bus and go back to the college. So anyway, this is a story. So anyone, let me introduce again. If you start reading this book, I'm one of the sellers, start from chapter 10. This is a story of me and Walden and other friend when he become the international activist. So I met Walden when he decided to be global fighter. Against rather than in the Philippine politics, start to do at the global story. So we met in 1991. And in fact, since Professor Surichai and Chantana is here, those who introduced me to meet Walden is Professor Suthi Prasad said, saying that, Naruemon, you should go to see this guy. So thanks to this, so it's a lot of the story that Walden will be very important for you to do. More than that, when Thailand faced the economic crisis, and we are now facing the situation in the 1997 crisis. But in fact, Walden already come to Thailand in 1995. So for us as a Chulalongkorn University, we are really honored that Focus decided to take one of the office in Chulalongkorn on the 4th floor of the Kusuri building and open the Focus on the Global South. So it's not only celebrate the book of Walden, I would like to celebrate Focus on the Global South for your 30 years anniversary. And the more important, when you go further, very far book, when he talk about love, something like that. So the person that he take the photo with is our friend, Go, who already passed away because of cancer. And Go is the one who translate the book called Assamese Tragedy about the economic crisis in Thailand to be Thai. So for us, we have a kind of experience relationship. So I mean, academic doesn't always have to be really boring. It's very interesting and fascinating. So also thank you on behalf of Walden White friend that you are always with our friend until all the way through. I mean, it is here. So we experience all that 5 years of cancer battle that. So in that case, the global battlefield is not only politics. It's not only economic, even though Walden is really like to be political economy, but he himself also have another story. So you have to read the book between the line to see how the book tell the story and emotional. And also another thing that is also since Professor Surichai and Professor Chantana is here, Walden is also the one who wrote a curriculum. I think we have to thank to focus on the subject, which is Rosalia teaching the globalization in Asia Pacific. It was started by Walden. And at that time, I remember the student already mentioned that why Professor Walden only talking about alternative? We are very mainstream. We never know the mainstream yet. So why our class is talking about alternatives? So Walden may be able to tell us throughout his book that why we need alternative, not only mainstream development. And I think for us, it's also very good that we are in C Junction with those who start the course and those who teaching the course and those who create the curriculum and the program. So for us, I think without any other to tell, what I would like to introduce properly a Walden is that this man have a lot of the story to tell you. His book might be only part of telling the story. And when you read for some chapter, you can ask from us who always have the direct experience what really happened in the book. So for me, I encourage you to buy the book. And those who are Thai, we are trying to ask one friend, girlfriend, ma'am, to be able to translate in Thai. So I hope that maybe CU Press or Jula might thinking about this. It's also very interesting. It's not the boring academic book, but it's also telling you between the line that is what really happened throughout the story. Warden himself, when he talked and wrote in the book, it's not only about what happened in his life, but also what really happened in the politics, not only in Thailand, but also in the world. We are now in the time that the liberal economy already start to die in some way. So Warden already fighting and asking on this issue. Maybe he not only telling the book, but maybe tell us that, okay, what will be happen. So without further ado, I return the microphone to Shalmali, who also our friend, and to properly introduce the program. Thank you.
ขอบคุณมากค่ะอาจารย์ When Walden started writing the book, I think it was 6-7 months ago, sent me an email and said, I think it's already reading like a spy thriller. So I said, okay, this will be a book worth definitely worth reading. So anyway, I mean, it will be always. So anyway, a quick run through of the program is after Walden speaks, we can take time for some questions or comments or anything you want to talk to him about, even if you haven't read his book, anything about his life, world politics, love life, pursuit of happiness kind of thing. And then before the program closes, Walden will be signing books for those who would like the signed copy. If any of you need to leave earlier for whatever reason, I'm sure Walden won't mind doing a little side signing. You won't, right? Yeah, so that's, and we really need to complete the program by 7 because BAACC closes early. So we don't have that much time. So anyway, so without further ado, I'd like to invite one of my dear old friends and mentor, comrade in arms, Professor Walden Bello.
Uh,
That mic.
Sure.
You have two mics. You can have both.
okay. Thank you. Thank you, Shalmali, for the introduction. And of course, thank you very much too. That was a great introduction. And this is such a great varied crowd. Many of you have entered my life at different points in time. There's Kun Surichayan Chanton over here, Kay. My colleagues in Focus, including former colleagues who flew from Japan just to attend this, Julie, and friends like people from Kusri are here, so many. And of course, the current staff in Kusri. Ajan, how are you? Chandru came all the way from New Delhi. Okay. And what can I say? This is great. Even my language teachers, Kunkop and her daughter Prewa, who have taught me what little I know about Thai. So, this is such a great gathering. And of course, let me just, I won't go through the whole book. I'll just sort of give highlights, and especially with respect to what happened here in the book around Thailand. So one can't write a memoir without having to do your early life before I became an activist, before my pre-political phase. Okay. And very briefly, I was born on an island in the Philippines, a real island. And my father was reading the book Walden by Thoreau. It's a book on anarchy when I was born. And I don't know whether, that's people, there's something about maybe some sort of psychology that makes people live up to the names that they're given. Because although I have been, or I am a socialist, there has always been a strong anarchic strain in me. And as you know, there has been a major big battle in the Philippines recently. And just 3-4 days ago, where so many young people who stoned the police were arrested. And I have spent a lot of my time in Facebook defending their right to stone the police, because the police in the Philippines and everywhere need to be reminded that they shouldn't oppress people. So in any event, my parents were artists, writers, and my mom was also a painter. And my mom was did a lot of her writing in her native vernacular called Ilocano in the Philippines. And she was always suspicious of Tagalog. People know in the Philippines, you have all these different ethno-linguistic groups, okay, that feel that they're superior to the different others, okay? So the being the child of an artist is something that's not very easy, because, as you know, artists live in a different world. They don't care too much about material things, and they care about art. They care about love. And one of the things that was very important while I was growing up was that my mother and father were thoroughly in love with one another, but they also were always quarreling over women. And what happened was, at one point, my mother couldn't take my father's shenanigans anymore, so she gave her a choice, him a choice. Either he retired forcibly from his job and lived with her on the island that I talked about, or she was going to just separate from him. So my dad finally saw the light and decided to become voluntarily a prisoner on this island several miles away from Manila. Now, the point that I'm trying to say here is that love was so important to them that they sort of forgot that there were children, and that somehow my dad, of course, lost his income by being voluntarily imprisoned. So the children had to scrounge around to be able to get their tuition fees and other things, while my parents were living out their romance on the island. So that's what I mean by it's not very easy to be the child of artists, because it's really true. They live on a different plane where the laws of gravity do not hold. Okay? But I love them. After I resented them for some time, I ended up loving them. Okay? So in any event, let me just say that another significant part of my life before I became an activist was I was trained in a Jesuit school. And as many of you who have undergone Jesuit training, you know that the Jesuits give you such a rigorous intellectual training that you can take any side of an argument and you can argue against yourself. And that's where the word Jesuitical came from. Okay, so I was in an American Jesuit school in the Philippines. It was an enclave of Americanism, and much of my life was really later trying to shed this training or this Western training that I got from American Jesuits. And but looking back at it now, I don't think I could have been what I ended up without this very rigorous kind of training that I had under the Jesuits, even if I ended up loathing them politically, because they were basically purveyors of Western colonial imperialism. Now, I owe my becoming an activist to a very unlikely person, Henry Kissinger. As many of you know, Henry Kissinger was the Secretary of State of Richard Nixon. And I was a graduate student at Princeton University, and I was determined to become a sociologist. And while I was progressive, I was not really an activist. And then one day, as I was walking to my class, there was a sit-down strike in front of what was called the Institute for Defense Analysis, which is an institute that was doing contract work for the Defense Department. So, and this was the time when Nixon and Kissinger invaded Cambodia in May 1970. Hey. And so out of curiosity, I crossed the street, and this is that row of fraternity houses in Princeton University. And just curious. And then the police came and started in a very brutal way yanking the students and the faculty who were in protests. And suddenly, I don't know what happened, I was suddenly sitting together with the protesters. It was just like that. Although in that flash of a second, I knew that I was going to be deported because they were very strict with foreign students then. If you participated in any anti-American activity, expect deportation. So, so I don't know what propelled me to do that at that instant, but in any case, of course, we were taken by the police, booked, arrested, and I waited for the deportation order. And I told my wife that we should be, I didn't tell her that we were going to be deported. It's just that I said that let's be prepared for anything. And we waited and we waited, and it didn't come. Okay. And it was only when the Department of Homeland Security in the United States was established back in 2000, after 9/11, 2001, that the local criminal records and the federal criminal records were brought together, so that actually I slipped through the net. Something that would not be possible now, as we've seen all these arrests of anti-Zionist demonstrators in New York. So I was lucky that happened, but I was even more lucky that that's when I began to be an activist. Ever since then, as Shal said, it was just one street fight after another, arrest after arrest after arrest. And I joined the anti-Marcos movement. I became a member of the Communist Party of the Philippines for about 15 years. You know, I was a very obedient cadre of the Communist Party, very disciplined. But of course, things happened, and 1986 came along in the Philippines, the so-called EDSA revolution, and the left couldn't quite adjust to what was happening. There was a big debate within the left. Where should we go? And it was within that context that I left the Communist Party of the Philippines and became a more independent activist. So that's as far as my pre-Thailand life was concerned. Then, of course, Naruemon showed up at Food First in the United States. I was then the executive director, and urged me to come to Thailand because there was major things happening. This was during the Shinda period, and I didn't. Thailand was so far from my imagination that, but out of comradeship, I said, okay, I would come. And so that's how I ended up here. And then we went on to found Focus on the Global South. And this was in 1995, and we're celebrating now the 30th year of Focus on the Global South. And as Ajahn Ju has already said, we had great assistance from Ajahn Surichai, Ajahn Chantana, Ajahn Suti, and others in bringing us to Focus because we felt that it was important for us to be based at the university because the university afforded political protection. And that's very important for institutions like Focus. And that's then how Focus really grew. We did that study called Siamese Tragedy, which was published in 1998 and was translated into Thai by my wife, although she was not yet my wife then. Okay. Her relatives are here, and I'm really thanking them for being here. But that book attempted to detail why the Thai path of development that was pretty much recommended by the World Bank and the IMF had so many costs. And that's why the title was Siamese Tragedy. And that book came out just as the Thai financial crisis hit, or the Asian financial crisis hit in 1997. So I guess many of you were already born in 1997. Okay. Some of you were not yet, but I can tell you that when the financial crisis hit in 1997, it seemed like the end of the world in Thailand. I mean, people just did not know this big crash in the economy. The VAT got devalued by so many percent. Investors left the country, and Focus, we got a chance to be on the ringside of the Asian financial crisis because the epicenter of the crisis was here in Thailand. And of course, it spread to Indonesia. And although I think Anissa wasn't born yet then. Were you born already? 97? Okay, okay. It spread to the Philippines, and I think Julie, you weren't born yet, right? Okay, okay. But in any event, that was our inside view of the crisis. And that's when we really got into analyzing what globalization was all about, what neoliberalism was all about, that this was a path that was destroying countries, and that we needed to really oppose this path of neoliberal globalization. And one of the ways that we did that was not, of course, just to write, but we were so lucky that in the UNCTAD conference in 2000, the head of the IMF, Michel Kamdesu, said he was going to come to Thailand. And they said that this was going to be his retirement, sort of. He was going to leave the IMF gracefully, bequeathing it to his successors. And he came to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development to tell UNCTAD that, stop criticizing globalization. Okay? You know that you're wrong. You should stop criticizing globalization because the wave of the future is globalization. And the IMF was a central force in that. But we were so happy because this gave us an opportunity that would not come in a lifetime. And when Michel Kamdesu went to the Bangkok Conference Center, we had the big surprise ready for him. One of our comrades in the anti-globalization movement walked up to him with a cherry pie and put it in his face and rubbed it and rubbed it. And boom, that photo went all throughout the world, and it showed the hatred of the people for the IMF. And I can tell you that it was so popular in Thailand that our friend who did it, okay, the police did not keep him in jail. In fact, the police were happy. They released him. And then when he went to the Chula campus, all the co-eds in Chula wanted to have a picture with him because this was the time that the IMF was subjecting Thailand to very horrible structural adjustment. So 3 years later, Thaksin Shinawatra kicked the IMF out of Thailand. And I would like to believe that the first step in kicking the IMF out of Thailand was the cherry pie that we smashed into Kamdesu's face. It was the most cost-effective action, actually, that Focus undertook because our only investment was the 50 baht that it cost me to buy the cherry pie in the 7-Eleven at the convention center. So basically, those years then, Focus was combining direct action, helping organize people, coordinated with other groups, doing analysis, and that became the Focus style, in which we became noted for in terms of what we were doing. So I think you can, from the people, the alumni in Focus here, will remember those years as the years when we were fighting globalization, the big anti-globalization movement. We were practically everywhere, in Seattle, in Genoa, wherever. All I know is that probably Shalmali and my combined air miles with Joy and others went into the millions because we were all over the world. But it was worth it because, of course, we were not the only ones. We were part of a big movement that eventually, beginning with Seattle, brought down globalization and neoliberalism. That finally, in 1998, in 1999, we had the big protest in Seattle, and globalization never really and neoliberalism never really recovered from that. Okay, so unfortunately, of course, one of the things that emerged from that was Donald Trump, because the progressives, in fact, were on the forefront of the anti-globalization movement, but for a number of reasons, it was the far right that inherited the anti-globalization, the rewards of that. We need not go into why that happened, but nevertheless, parallel to that, and I'm sure that I'm glad that Herbert Dosana is here, Focus also took a very prominent role in the anti-imperialist movement in the Middle East. And we, okay, we'll see you then. It's the relatives of my late wife leaving. So thank you for coming. Okay, and we'll see you. But this is the time that and Herbert is the one who organized this. We went to Baghdad to try to stop the American invasion. People denounced us as human shields of Saddam Hussein. And we were determined to stay there to wait for the American invasion, but the consul of the Philippines told us that we had to leave because otherwise she would lose her job. But in any event, it was several years of commitment to what was happening, to opposing American imperialism in the Middle East. And in 2021, we were very happy that although, of course, it was the people in the Middle East that really stopped the United States, that we in the global anti-interventionist movement also had to play a role in defeating the United States. And we also, in 2021, that mad scramble from the exits in Afghanistan, just like the scramble from Vietnam in 2000, in 1975. So, so basically, I think with our other allies and with so many other people, we were on this roller coaster of anti-globalization and anti-intervention. And it was also in this context that we met with people that Trump and the Israeli Zionists hate. And we understood in our meetings with Hamas and with Hezbollah that they were national liberation movements, that they were not terrorist organizations. So it gave us a very good sense of the movements of resistance in the Middle East. So these were the 2010s, and focus was already established in a number of countries: India, Cambodia, the Mekong region, the Philippines, and of course, one of the things we were so committed to was bringing down the World Trade Organization. And we did it both through participation in big events like Seattle and the Cancun in 2003. And finally, we, meaning the anti-globalization movement, was able to bring down 2 ministerials of the World Trade Organization. And now the World Trade Organization has ceased to exist as an engine of globalization. it's practically dead. And I would say that's not so much because the US sabotaged it, but because civil society and the countries of the global south were the ones that really threw a monkey wrench into its operations. So basically, this is sort of just to give you a sense of the kind of developments that were happening and are recorded in the book. And when people read the book, they immediately go to chapter 19. And chapter 19, everybody that I've talked to said they start with chapter 19, and chapter 19 is titled Love, Death, and Love in Bangkok. So this, for some reason, people love to start with this. And some people, that's the only thing they read. So this is really, and I'm sorry that both relatives left, but it was something that I wanted them to read, although it was the Thai translation of the chapter was there. But what I wanted to read, and this will be my last few minutes, was from this chapter, because in many ways, I think this chapter was the article that became the most widely distributed, because a Chinese journalist came to me when he had read it someplace, that he was going to put it in the internet in China. And he says that I can assure you it will reduce housewives to fear. So I said, sure, why not? And so people have heard of it in China maybe because of that, not because of the work that I've done on many other things. But let me just say that it's a very interesting set of events, because my wife actually was the one who proposed me, which is very rare. And I think would not understand. I mean, she was, to use masculine language, she was being chased by so many men. But for some reason, when her mother was dying, she said her mother wanted her to get married. And so she said, yes, I'll get married. And then she decided that the only person that she would consider being a husband was me. And she sent me a text, and I was teaching in New York. She said, you have to come immediately. So you never said no to Paul. Okay. Especially if for so many years you had subliminally desired her. Okay. So when I came here, she said, okay, I want to make a proposition. My mother's, I have made a commitment to my mother. I made a commitment that I would not be alone, and that I needed somebody to get married to, and get married to me. Okay. And I said, of course, you never refuse Paul. And everybody was quite surprised, right?
Chu and all her friends, when Paul announced that we were together, you were also surprised, but they never knew that they didn't nor expect this. And I think many of those male friends were quite upset that somebody from the Philippines was snatching a national treasure from Thailand. In any event, we had a great 5 months, and then he was diagnosed with fourth stage cancer in 2014. So we had about 5 years, and it was, as many of you who had either gone through treatment or had relatives going to treatment, you know how rough it can be. But the one thing is that basically, I decided that my political life would be put on hold. And so I had been in Congress. I had been there for 3 terms, the Philippines. But I had my differences with the administration of Pinoy Aquino, because he was holding double standards. He ran on a platform of anti-corruption, and then he began to go after his enemies on corruption, but he tolerated his friends. And so I went up to president and told him, "You can't do this. I mean, we ran on a platform of anti-corruption against everybody who's corrupt." And I documented how his buddies were slipping government funds. And the budget minister, was throwing it to his wife's congressional district. I said, we can't tolerate this. And so the long story is that I resigned from the House of Representatives Philippines because I could no longer follow the line of my party, which was to be allied with Aquino. And I said, I have to cut ties with Aquino, but this means I have to leave my party because I was supposed to be representing it. And how can you represent a party when you're against the main ally of the party? So I am very proud of the fact that this was the only recognition of principle in the history of the Congress of the Philippines. And people that I talked to that I was resigning tell me, "Are you crazy? Nobody resigns from Congress. Everybody wants to get into Congress, and you're the only one who's really nuts." And I said, "Well, we have to make a stand against corruption. And if you can't make a stand against corruption, then you're nothing." So that was the context in which, therefore, I was given the opportunity to devote my last year completely to her. And I spent most of that time in Bangkok taking care of her, driving her to Chulalongkorn University every 2 weeks for the chemo. And basically, it was the only time in my life when the personal became a priority over the political. So that's why that relationship was so memorable to me. And I won't go through it any further. It's chapter 19. And but I ask you, don't limit your reading to chapter 19. So So basically, that's where we're uh, at this point in time. Shalmali said that as I wrote the book, it began to seem like I was writing a spy novel, you know, and and I did feel, that when writing it, and I recommend to you, do try to engage or write your memoir, and then you realize that you've done so many things that actually not only have you done so many things, but they hang together. There's a logic to one's life, okay? And that logic to my life is what I tried to present in this book. I do want to say that it took several people over a number of years to convince me to write this book. Because at first I thought, I really don't have anything significant to write about. Because there are those of us who are political people who identify ourselves mainly with our politics and the parties we're with. And if your politics and your parties don't come out on top, then you feel like a failure. And I think I was one of those people that felt that, hey, we didn't win the National Democratic Revolution in the Philippines. Hey, we didn't win the Socialist Revolution. So what do I need to write about? But because I did not want to disappoint my friends who were urging me to write this book, I began to think, why not write? And when I began to write, I said that our record is not too bad. We may have not made the Socialist Revolution or the National Democratic Revolution in the Philippines, but hey, we stopped globalization. We discredited neoliberalism. We stopped the United States in the Middle East. Of course, in the context of with so many other people. Okay? So I just wanted to say that our record wasn't so bad. Okay, that in fact we did have some wins, even as we had some losses. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Walden. And I hope what Walden's presentation of global battlefields will entice all of you to read the book and buy the book. And we have time for some questions. But before we go, Walden, there was a small correction that Alec made, which is very important, that the buying of Michel Camdessou was not only 100 baht. It was probably 200 baht, right? Because there were 3 pies floating around. Yeah, we had many pies because we never knew when the time would be right. So a pie always had to be ready. Strategy. And I remember that because I bought one. Well, there was thanks to 7-Eleven and bad pies. And another important little thing, which is, I'm sorry? I don't know. Was Cherry's favorite pie? Cherry pie. Walden, was that maybe that was the only pie available, I
Yeah,
think.
it was the only pie available.
Yeah.
But it's good because it was red.
Yeah. And the day the buyer came to Chula because he was our guest. So the police brought him to us. Okay, he's yours before we deport him in 24 hours or 40. But they all liked him very much. And it was Valentine's Day. And not only did the co-eds not just the co-eds, but everybody not only did the students want to take a picture, they brought him red roses. He was a hero. So there was, I think, Ajahn, all of you, all the Archula Ajahns remember that. Anyway, floor's open for a few questions. If anybody has any questions.
Thank you very much for the time. My name is Anya. I'm from Mahidol University. So my question would be, because I'm Gen Z, I'm still 22 or 23 years old. My question would be is how to construct hope for young people, because I feel like as an activist, we have like young people have like some sort of like a double burden. We have to learn from past mistakes, that why, especially in Southeast Asia, why democracy didn't come in Southeast Asia. We have to endure inequality and rising authoritarianism, while also we have to at least have imagination on where does this movement go, because I think in my personal experience is that the imagination thing tends to be lost in our activism. So my question would be how to construct hope and how to build better imagination based on your experience as an activist and academic. Thank you very much.
Questions, queries from anybody?
You mentioned the extent to which Trump has and the right have benefited from the implosion of the international system over the past year. Can you expand on that a little bit and perhaps give us your feelings about where that's going and whether that is necessarily good or bad for the emerging economies?
You can speak in any language. We can interpret. No? Sorry. Any more questions, comments?
Hello, Professor. I'm Gabby Sajo Santana. I'm a master's student in Chulalongkorn University, and I'm actually from the Philippines. And I haven't read the book yet, but based on what you said earlier, I think it's a historical perspective, right, of global battlefields. I just want to ask, through these experiences, what do you think will be like the next battlefield in the next few years? Based on these historical events, would we be able to tell what will our next battlefield be? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you for the questions. Well, let me just say here that one of the things that I'm very emphatic about personally is that the youth should really take the leadership of today's movements. And the reason I say that is because it is the young that combine what Keynes called the animal energies of people with a thirst for social justice. And this is also the time that their minds are so open to new paradigms of change, which the older generation has already probably closed off. Okay? So there is a reason that the people in their late teens and 20s and 30s are the ones on the forefront of change. And this is why in the context of the Philippines, I have always pushed that it should be the Gen Z and millennials that should really be there. And the old generation, please step back. But the problem is that the old generation usually thinks that it still has the formulas, when in fact it is no longer in sync with what is happening. And so that's the first thing. And I think that the second thing is the priority of action. That even if you cannot intellectually bring things together, if you're still searching, the important thing is to place yourself on the line. Put yourself on the line, because action really is the one that that's the greatest ignition, for activism. If I did not put myself on the line at Princeton, even though I was just passing by, I don't think I would have been what I am. Probably I would have become a progressive intellectual, but an activist, I don't think so. But there comes that moment when you have to suspend judgment and just step up. Okay. So, and I think that's what's been happening in Nepal, in Indonesia, in the Philippines recently, is that our young people are basically putting their bodies on the line. And I think this is very, very important. And then finally, I think that it is important for them to talk to the older generation of activists and learn from their mistakes. Okay? Because there are people who would like to talk to you without trying to dominate and feel they're still the leaders. Okay? But it's important to pass that memory of analysis and action to the younger generation. And I think this is one of the problems in the left internationally, that the lessons of the previous generation have not been put together systematically and passed on. What I mean to say is that we don't have this major effort to put together, our historical memory. And that's very important. And I think your generation will need to be able to pass that on too. So it may just be an anti-corruption struggle now, but once you put your body on the line, then analysis is going to follow that it's much more systemic than just corruption. So the important thing, I think, is the priority of action. Someone said that the philosophers have so far interpreted the world, but the thing is to change it. And Marx said that. And just one experience that I've had about the priority of action is that, before Seattle, the whole establishment was saying globalization's good, globalization's good, globalization's good. But when people put themselves, thousands of people in Seattle put themselves on the line, battled the police, and brought down the World Trade Organization, the next day, all the press and the media and the intellectuals are saying, maybe globalization is not so good. What happened? Was it an intellectual process? No. People basically went out in the streets and kicked the police and the World Trade Organization and Bill Clinton and all of those guys. And that mass action changed the course of history. With respect to the second question, I think it's pretty much, if we're looking at the Philippines right now, I think there was massive protests on last Sunday where thousands of people marched, and many of our friends from the Philippines here, Joy and others probably were part of the march. But in the evening, what happened was that there was a major, the word is called riot, but youths began to try to assault the presidential palace, and so many people got arrested. And now, basically, it's a new day. Basically, I think the combination of the peaceful protests and the mass actions that were not so peaceful combined together to create a whole new dynamic in the Philippines at this point in time. Where this will go, I'm not quite sure, but certainly I disagree with all those people right now, and I've been battling them on the internet, who've been condemning the youth, saying that they're provocateurs, etc., etc., etc. And my whole point is that the role of youth is to rebel, right? That's the historical role expected of the young, is to rebel and to try to overthrow the establishment. If you don't do that, then your generation hasn't done it, has gone. So basically, I think that, to come back to what I was saying earlier, it's youth that combines the animal energies with the thirst for social justice. And that combination only comes once in one's life. The last point is, okay, this is a bit difficult because I think it was the progressive movement, the left, of which Focus was a part. We provided a critique of globalization. We provided the contradictions as early as the early 1990s. We said that this was not going anywhere, and the anti-globalization movement, in fact, was or the alter globalization movement, was, a central factor in discrediting globalization and neoliberalism. The problem was that the traditional parties of the left, the social democratic parties, were co-opted into neoliberal globalization. And they were the traditional parties of the working class in Europe, in the United States, the Democratic Party. And because of that, the people who were hurt by globalization, workers, the Midwest, parts of Europe, the industrialized, basically they could no longer find a representative to speak their cause. And this is why we provided the critique, but our political friends and parties did not provide the backup because they joined the conservatives in pushing globalization. And this is why they lost the working class in the United States, and they've lost the working class in Europe. And this is why it's a very difficult situation that we're all facing right now, because it's working class supported fascism that is on the rise in so many parts of the world. Having said that, we have no choice but to try to win people back, and we just have to present a better alternative than the far right at this point in time. So I just was in a Zoom discussion with Joseph Stiglitz and an economist from the Copenhagen School this morning, and it was a debate about globalization. And my point in this debate was that deglobalization is taking place right now. It's not whether deglobalization is not taking place, it's taking place, but what kind of deglobalization? Trump is onto this unilateral, fascist type of deglobalization, and we have another vision of deglobalization in which we do not withdraw from the international economy, but we use the international economy to be able to support, a domestic internal economy, and where people are not imprisoned in one paradigm, or like the World Trade Organization, but you have diversity that marks the way that developing countries relate to the international economy, so that they have what is called development space. So it's Trump's deglobalization and our deglobalization And at the moment, Trump is winning. So we better get our work together.
So that's the next battlefield. I mean, that's right there, defeating the right wing who are co-opting our language and our concepts. Time check. Leah, do we have time for more questions? Okay, we do have time for another round for any question that anybody have.
Yes. This might be I don't know whether it's a proper question, but just my doubt because of the situation that is going on globally. You have Trump in Europe, in Asia, in Philippines, in Thailand, Indonesia, and Nepal. So I have some people, not only me, some people have question. Do we still need or do we still want to believe in democracy representative? Do we still need to have this system of, governing by representative? Because election and, kind of representative have become more and more big question. So I don't know, because of this battle that's going on in every corner of the world. It's just for your comment.
It's okay. It's okay. Pass the mic back. Yeah. Are you doing it? I'll run.
Hi, I know we're running out of time. Hi, Walden. It's good to be here and to listen to you speak about the memoir. First of all, congratulations. I'm very happy that you finally relented to those who were encouraging you to write the memoir. And I'm looking forward to reading the book. I'm privileged to have worked with Walden Bello in my former capacity as an official of an American philanthropy working here in Asia. And I've had a chance to collaborate with Shalmali and focus on the Global South. My question is a follow-on to what you've just said in response to the first set of questions. I do wonder, you make references to a failure to kind of bring in the working class in the US, and I think similar patterns in other places. And I do wonder what thoughts you might have in terms of how the theater for action or the different theaters of action are related. You talk about the global battlefields, but we also talk about local, national, regional battlefields. And I'm wondering if you have some insights as to how these fields are related and whether they might offer some clues as to why we've neglected action in certain parts and left, constituencies. And second, as a former official of a donor organization, I'm curious to know which part of donor money was used to buy the pie.
It's my own money. I didn't charge it to anybody. I don't know about the others who bought the pies. Yeah. Any other questions?
Well, I have many questions, but one question about globalization is, okay, at the intellectual level, we can say it doesn't work, it's not there. On the practical level, it's happening every day. Migration is one of the main trends and is clearly a global trend. And it's become the main point for the right? So then my question to you is, what is your view of how to address migration, refugee issue, and all the xenophobia that is going on? Because it's not only the issue of workers, but it's the issue of this cheap labor going all over the world, which is still and is not valued for the contribution they are giving and remain a global trend. So what is your thinking about this? Because this is at the moment at the core of the discourse in the United States as well as in Europe. And I think even in Thailand.
Ground, right? I was just worried about the time. Okay. Well, the around democracy, I think, well, definitely, I think representative democracy, as classically practiced in the West, as well as here in the global South, has really has shown to have its limitations. But I think just a very short answer is either there are just two alternatives now. Either authoritarianism is becoming very attractive, or we really move to real participatory democracy. So I think we have to deepen the democratic revolution because there is no choice. We can't stay in the middle because all the different democratic institutions now are being riddled with limitations, corruption, and failure to respond to people's needs. So I think so I think those are really the choices we have: either participatory democracy or authoritarianism, and that's going to be the battle over the next few years. That will intersect with the battle against the far right. Now, the second point that was raised is definitely, I think, local and global and struggles must really be should be connected. And my sense is that we see that being connected in a number of different places at this point in time. For instance, in Europe, you do have a greater sense that the progressives or the left have to get together across borders because the right is getting together across borders, and that so that the internationalism is sort of something that must be must be developed at this point in time, and the sooner we really move on that, the better, because the right or the far right is really moving. On the question of migration, this is a very difficult question. Of course, it's not that easy. I think that migration has become one of the far right's main appeal to the working class. And I think everywhere, and you mentioned Thailand, we're seeing that migrants are becoming the scapegoats for everything. And of course, if you open the television or you get into the internet, almost every day you have this massive deportations happening in the United States. And so one is that I think it is very important to take up the cause of migrants. And two is to link their struggles to workers' struggles. And that is happening on the ground. And three, to get workers very active in protecting migrants at this point in time. And it is also happening on the ground. Now, as for migration policy, we need to study that very carefully because, for instance, in Europe, the left is becoming divided all over, as to how to relate to migration. There, for instance, in Germany, the Linke Party basically says that whenever they made great gains in the last election in February, and their response when it came to migration was that migrants are not the problem. It's really the bad policies of the Social Democrats and the and the conservatives, and they said that's our stand. We're an anti-racist party, and they got on a very strong, firm stand against migration. They got nearly 9% of the vote, and which was fairly significant. So for them, they feel that it was making a strong stand rather than giving in to the parties on the left that basically said we have to compromise with those sectors that want to limit migration. So, but of course, this is something that has to be handled in very specific ways from one country to another. But it is the flashpoint issue. And we do have, I think progressives really need to be able to articulate a policy towards migration that really will be able to protect the rights of migrants while at the same time focusing on the real problems. The real problems, when you come right down to it, is capitalism. At least that's my view. Okay.
Any more time?
I appreciate your mentioning and you're talking about internationalism. And I was wondering from an ASEAN perspective, how trade unionism as it's traditionally been practiced is no longer working. So can you give advice for across generations, not just new generation, but also, trade unionism, how it needs to be quite practiced differently in ASEAN context?
This is sort of yes. I mean, I think the first thing that we need to point out is that it's not just ASEAN trade unionism has similarity to trade unionism elsewhere in the world at this point. That in many ways, part of the problem of trade unionism, and I'm not exactly sure, Chandru, if you would agree with respect to India, but certainly in the West and in many parts of ASEAN, is that they have become very limited in the definition of who should be included in the working class. That basically they give in to the ruling elite's definition of the working class as really being those who have been originally here by culture and by race and by blood. They may not say that explicitly, but they sort of accommodate that. And I think if you don't, because the working class is developing in a very dynamic fashion, so that there are, that as people in the Linke told me, in Germany, the reason, or in France, the Mélenchon's party, they said the Communist Party is dead because they have this image of the working class. It's in the 1950s. It's white, and it's in industries, and in manufacturing, and that's no longer the case. The working class is all over the services, etc., etc. So this new vision of the working class as encompassing a whole set of people engaged in being exploited has to be taken in terms of the way that trade unionism should be reformed. Otherwise, it becomes sort of, yes, people get stuck in previous definitions of who is included in the working class. So that may be a bit general. Of course, within ASEAN, you have specific problems with workers in all the different countries. And corruption is a very big part of the problem. I think that trade unions being co-opted by the government is another big problem. Is there such a thing as, you know, a real trade unionism, for instance, in a place like Singapore? I don't think so. You know, is there? And what is the state of the trade union movement in Thailand? And I'm not the person to be able to answer that. I think Ju or Ajahn Chantana, Ajahn Surichai would probably have a better answer to that. But we do have our own specific problems in the Philippines. I won't go into that right now because I think we're running out of time. So, okay.
Is there is time for another question if anybody would like one more, because we are supposed to finish at 7. Yeah, or maybe what we can do, if there are no questions, maybe we can go into the book signing part of it, because let's do that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, there is this person who was imprisoned by Mussolini for so many years. His name was Antonio Gramsci, and one of his Mussolini said that when he pointed to Gramsci, he says, "We must kill the brain of this person." He had a saying that I think is very appropriate to what is happening right now, which is, he says, pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will. Whether you like it or not, those go together. But he says, you need to always make sure that the optimism of the will is on top, which my point about the priority of action, that there's only a certain point by which we intellectualize what is before us. And, you know, it's time to take, you know, action. And those people who came to Seattle in 1998, I don't think they had any idea that they were going to change the world. All they knew that was that they were going to bring down the WTO. And then the ministerial collapsed, and it was a new world. Deglobalization was dying, and neoliberalism was discredited. And it wasn't an intellectual debate that brought that forward. It was action of people on the streets and the action of developing country delegates within the convention center in Seattle. This is very memorable for me because I just had to write, you know, because I've been trying to defend those people in the Philippines who've been taken by the police and who've been and who, so many of the people in the middle class are saying that these people were disruptive. And Seattle was very significant for me because we were on the streets, and I personally was had to stop a policeman by kicking him in a certain sensitive part because he was manhandling a woman comrade. So there's time in which in the heat of street action, what is offensive and defensive action, legal and illegal action, there's a gray zone that happens. And all you need to do, all you have to do, or sometimes you cannot but pick up the stone and throw it at the police. And I didn't want to do it, but in Genoa and in Seattle, I could not resist. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jack. Sorry, you're all still clapping. So thank you very much, Walden, and thank you everybody for coming. And before we close the session, or rather transition to the next part of the session of book signing, I would like to hand the mic back to my colleague in Southeast Asia Junction, and again from Focus on the Global South, Kopkun Maka.
A big round of applause. Thank you so much. And thank you for hosting with us here at C Junction. The books are available on the side. They are 500 baht. If you want to grab a copy, if you already have the book, we'll be signing it up front here. So please form a line. Again, thank you so much for joining us for today's event. We have some snacks outside. If you would like to make your way out, converse more. Yeah, if you want to converse more. And thank you so much for joining us. C Junction is a venue for events on Southeast Asia. We run on donations. So if you would like to support our space and activities such as this, you can make donation right over there. The books will be available on the site as well. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a good night, everyone.